I'm going to go ahead and start the recording.
Okay. I think we have everybody.
Good morning, Chair Zepeda.
Not yet. Yeah.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Here we go. I guess we'll think Andrew, do we have everyone from staff?
We do.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing your morning with us. If we can call this meeting to order. Ms. Gibbs, if you can please call roll.
Sure. Chair Zepeda.
Here.
Vice Chair King Meredith.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum for our committee.
Thank you. Then I guess next is approval of the agenda.
Okay.
Andrew, is that you?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. Let me
Yeah.
give it
I'm not
Well,
sure.
actually, I think it's public comment, right? Sorry, it's public
Okay.
comment.
Right.
a.
Sure. So we have not received any written public comment at this time. And we have one staff member in as a attendee. Unless he raises his hand, I'll give him a minute. Okay, seeing that no hands are raised, we have no public comment at this time.
Thank you. And I see that Justin's as the attendee. I don't know if Justin needs to be on this side of the meeting.
Yeah,
As a panelist.
I spoke to him and he is listening in.
Oh, okay, she's listening. Perfect. Good morning, Justin. All right. So
Okay.
since there's no public comment, then I guess if we can get approval of the agenda.
Yes.
Right, Ms. Andy, if you can.
Yes.
I think-
Can I get a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to approve of the agenda for
Is-
this morning's meeting.
Is there a need to approve the agenda? Is there a reason why we shouldn't just proceed to the first item?
We can just, I don't remember. We haven't done this in a couple months.
No, I don't think, no, I think we have our roll call public comment for items not on the agenda. We can just proceed assuming staff is comfortable with the first item on the agenda.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
If you'd like to proceed,
you, Counselor.
the first item will do so, Chair Cepeda, and that's a discussion of reclaimed water discussion regarding evaluating the possibility of delivering reclaimed water for new development in Richmond. And Michael has a short presentation to talk about some of the issues or questions involved, and then we will be able to answer questions and have a discussion around, you know, what our next steps are if we are taking any additional next steps.
Good morning. Give me just 1 second as I get the presentation queued up. There we go. So as Andrew said, we will talk this morning a bit about the feasibility of recycled or reclaimed water, which in this case we are referring to as purple pipe. In this presentation, we'll briefly go through sort of the purpose of this discussion, what it is and what it is not, an overview of the different components of this discussion, where we'll go into a bit of detail in what we did and found, some ballpark initial costs, and then I'll open up to questions where you all may need some additional detail or ask some questions where we miss things. So the purpose of this discussion and what we did here was look into the development of a delivery system. And just to be clear, there are a number of items that need to be investigated to have a real discussion around whether or not this is feasible for the district. We did not go through an investigation of figuring out if this is feasible. More so what staff did is we looked and identified all of the things that we would need to discuss in order to be able to give an educated response or discussion around whether or not this is feasible. What we also did is we looked at some very high level cost estimate of what we thought it would take in the initial steps of having the discussions that we'll need to have. And those are the cost estimate that we'll give you at the end of this presentation. So when looking into this, there's a number of headings that we identified as areas that we would need to investigate. One of the obvious ones is the construction of the pipe system. And the first question that pops up is how much is it going to cost and who's going to pay for it? Again, all of these items are things that either staff would need to look into or we would need to bring in consultants in order to help us look at some of these items. Cost of construction is absolutely one that we would want to bring someone in to help us look at. We would need to identify what method of installation are we going to provide. Is it going to be a horizontal directional drill, open trench? Each of those have benefits as well as some cons to them. And it's not just keeping in mind, it's not just the installation of the initial pipe of our main branch, but then you would need laterals to connect individual properties to our line for using of our purple pipe. We'd also need to probably meter these lines. So all of these things are things that we would need to look into when we're looking at construction costs and the feasibility of constructing this line. One of the things that we briefly identified was we don't believe we have any ability to reuse any of our current pipes. So all of the pipes that we would be putting in would be new pipes from our plant to wherever we're piping this reclaimed water. And the reasoning behind that is we have sewage flowing through our current pipes. We don't want to mix it with the recycled water, but we also would have to somehow shut off service of the sewer service in order to run reclaimed water back the opposite direction. It just, at a very basic level, doesn't seem feasible. So we we believe we'd have to look into that a lot more. Maintenance, this is an unfamiliar area for WCW, so we definitely need to bring someone in that has experience in maintaining these lines, because these lines will definitely have to be maintained, and currently not really a quantifiable number for us, but definitely would be a real cost maintaining these pressurized lines. This line would, these lines would undoubtedly go through a number of different jurisdictions. So we need to negotiate with different cities and counties, for the city lines that it crosses, and potentially different easements. So we need to look into this. And again, this is not intended to be an assessment of those things that we need to do, as much as just identifying the things that we would need to go back and assess in further detail in order to give a real answer as to whether or not this is feasible for the organization. Some other things we need to look into are water sales. If we are offering reclaimed water to residents, we're essentially, I would assume, selling that water to residents. Can we sell water? All of our current flow is contracted to East Bay Mud for the use in the RARE program. And as I understand it, East Bay Mud claims sole rights to sell water in our area. So we need to look into that and have some discussions with them around that. Is there a demand for it? We have plenty of water in the winter months when most everyone has plenty of water for irrigation, which is what we would assume that this water would be used for when folks need waters in the summer. So how would we utilize the water that we have, and how would we keep up with the summer demand if that's the purpose here? Do we store the winter flow so that we can use it in the summer? And if so, how do we store that? Where do we store that? And what's the cost for storing that? Actually, let me go back to the previous slide. And then we'd have to look at what's the price for the users, what's the price for the end users, and how do we develop that price? Is it based on our CIP and maintenance costs? Are there other factors that go into that? Again, all things that we would need to study in order to come up with an answer for what does it cost? What's the demand? Can we sell this water? The next item that we looked into was storage. And ideally, it seems as though we would want to create some storage to store some of the water if we're looking to use the winter flows in the summer. Is our current water quality resource recovery plant a viable option for storage? What are our capacity needs? We will, at the end of the Clean and Green project, we'll have some drying beds that are not being used moving forward. And could we use these for storage? And what's the additional cost to make these usable for reclaimed water? The other thing that just comes up in that discussion is potable water, as opposed to purple pipe water, which would be used for irrigation. The potable water would be used to offset or to replenish some of our drinking water, and it would need to go through an additional process. And is that process possible? Is it possible for us to convert our plant or upgrade our plant into a plant that would be able to complete that process and provide potable water? What's the cost, and what are the benefits to that? Those are all things that we need to talk about in our outside of the wheelhouse of our current staff. So we definitely need to, bring someone in to help us with that discussion and investigation. Then we thought about the fact that we need to look at the environmental and GHG components of this, and are there environmental benefits? And if there are, what are they? And are they negated at all or reduced at all by the GHG footprint from pumping? Pumping water around. Currently, our sewer system is a gravity system. So for the most part, our sewage flows from the highest points in the district down to the plant, which is the lowest point in the district. And now we're talking about reversing that potentially, depending on where we're trying to send this reclaimed water. So if we're trying to send it, for instance, from our plant back up to our Hilltop office, there's a great elevation difference that we would have to overcome via pumps. And it takes a lot of energy to do so. The other thing that we would need, and that again is something that we would bring in consultants to help us look at the environmental components, benefits, as well as cost environmentally for doing this. The next component we looked at was our internal or organizational climate and strategic goals, and does this support or conflict with those goals? And I think in some ways it does support, and in other ways it potentially would conflict. Then we have legal components and things that we would have to get our legal team involved into looking into, such as, do we have the right to sell this water? And if we don't, how do we negotiate that right with those that currently own the rights to sell water in our district? What are the risks in terms of safety to the end user of using our water, and how do we protect the organization should someone take our reclaimed water and use it in a way that we are not intending for it to be used, such as drinking it? We need to bring in our legal team to work through the jurisdictional boundary issues that I talked about a bit earlier in terms of going through neighboring cities and counties. And then we thought about, the potential for an alternative, which would be potentially gray water pickup, which may eliminate some of the complications that we foresee in constructing and pumping and those sort of things. So taking our reclaimed water and just offering folks the ability to come and pick it up from our plant, as opposed to us piping it somewhere else. And the last component of this discussion is really around the cost that we estimated. And there's a number of consulting investigations that we envision we'd need to look into before we could even delve deeply into this discussion. There's some engineering and regulatory as well as environmental components that we talked about earlier. And we're just expecting that at a minimum, we need to spend about 20 to 30,000 talking to consultants, sort of hashing this out just to identify where we need to go next. On top of that, we'd have legal costs and staff time, all of this before we could come back with some sort of concrete numbers and discussions after our initial discussion. More longer term costs to be considered are the construction costs as well as the maintenance cost. That's our brief discussion, and I'd like to open up to any questions that you may have now.
Thank you, Michael. Director King Meredith, any questions or comments?
I just have right now for one, and thank you, Michael, for that presentation. It is to look at the environmental piece. Have the discussion, have you seen other cities that have done this recycling? Is this something that we're looking at toward to be very aggressive about looking at this point? And have you seen other cities to look at this, to look at the recycling of water, and how far have they gotten?
I'm not sure what other cities or agencies are currently doing. We didn't invest time into investigating what others were doing as much as identifying what we felt like we would need to investigate further before being able to answer some more detailed questions like that. What are other agencies doing? How successful is it for them? What did it cost them to do it? Those are all the components that we would need to look into in order to come back to the board and say, this makes sense or it doesn't make sense for the district. So again, the intent of this was really just to identify, these are the things that we need to look further into.
Okay. Okay.
We did have discussions with the general manager from East Bay Mud, who is the current water purveyor for the region, for the area. And in their long-term plans, they currently don't have plans for a purple pipe or reclaimed water distribution in this particular area. They have sufficient water to distribute. They do need to increase their distribution network, and they're looking at moving it up into El Cerrito and into Berkeley area. But primarily what that is that, like I said, the purple pipe, it's the main line distribution, and then it gets tapped off from there. And at this point can only be utilized for either redundant flow within the buildings, like happens in some areas in downtown Oakland, where there's a separate piping system within the building that it can be used for sanitary flushing, basically. Flush your toilets and it can go back, but it can't be used for potable water.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Anthony. I'm done, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Michael, great presentation. Thank you. These are all really great questions. I appreciate your time. I have been the one that's been kind of pushing this conversation. So thank you. You brought up I made some notes, a lot of really good questions in here. Want to give you a little bit of sort of sharing a little bit of where I'm coming from and some of the conversations I've had. And actually just the other day, I received an email from our assembly member, Buffy Wicks, who's very interested in this type of project. And they would also be probably looking to help us get funding. I also spoke to our congressmen and 2 congressmen, and they were both very interested in this project as well. So just throwing that out there, I spoke to director from East Bay Mud, Ms. McIntosh, Director McIntosh, and this has been one of her projects that she's had in mind for many, many years as she's been director for East Bay Mud. So one of your questions in there in slides is how do we work interagency, right? With all the different agencies that are going to be taking this. East Bay Mud is the purveyor of water. So what I envision is that we take a leadership role, but we don't take the leadership position, right? We let East Bay Mud help lead it, but we just kind of bring everyone to the table. What I've noticed is that everyone's talking in silos. I was talking to council members in the city of Pinot, and they're saying, yes, we want to do this. I was all right, let's bring everybody to the table. San Pablo will love to be able to have this. I just talked to the mayor the other day. El Cerrito, I know they're not part of our agency, right? But there's different cities that want to partake. But I think that we have the ability to be the leader without taking on
the whole
majority.
responsibility.
Yeah, without taking the whole responsibility, right? I think we have great minds. Michael, you've done a great presentation, right? With your great mind, Andrews, Aaron's, everybody else involved, just kind of orchestrating. And then this is what I envision, right? What will actually happen, I don't know. But what I envision is that you guys help orchestrate. East Bay Mud, being the purveyor, has to go after the money, and then they help bring us into the conversation, understanding that we do not have a lot of water, right? Part of your slide there, we know that during the summer times we don't have enough water, but who does have a lot of water, and they're actually disposing all of it, is the city of Richmond, right? The rest of Richmond that we don't currently survey that we don't currently service. So if we bring them to the conversation, and they're also very into this conversation, because I spoke to a couple of council members there, they did not realize that their water, right? And one thing that I love about our agency is all we do is sewage. So this is all we talk about day in, day out. The council members don't talk about this. So they were not aware that they were disposing of their water into the bay, or not all of them, or didn't notice all the pieces of sewage, or all the pieces that goes into the sewage, right? So they were not aware. So they're interested in seeing what kind of partnership they can do to give us that water. And us, not necessarily us as an agency, but maybe us as this purple pipe group, right? Whatever name we come up with, the purple group, whatever. But just bringing all the different stakeholders is what I kind of see us doing as taking the lead. Helping us if the decision is that we were to get funding, teaming up with East Bay Mud so that we could incorporate either one of the empty locations that we have in our plan, or we build out something new, partnering with East Bay Mud to help us get there, right? East Bay Mud is already having some conversations about the different sewage plants all around that they currently are sort of have jurisdiction, not jurisdiction, what's the word? I mean, like with us, they don't have jurisdiction, but they're partnering with us in other ways, right? So they're partnering with the city of Pinot. They're partnering with the city of San Pablo for other means, right? Because they're purveying the water. So I would love for us to take that leadership, and again, but not taking the brunt of the work. If we work with East Bay Mud, if we bring in everyone to the table, I think that's the main goal. Within working with Buffy Wicks and our 2 congressmen, Because again, they're very interested in this. And I have, again, an email where they emailed me and said, hey, you talked about purple pipe. We want to be in on this conversation. So Andrew, I'm going to, and Michael too, I'll CC you on this email to them. Basically, that's all they said. So we want to bring them to the table. And maybe the table is going to be, hey, we want to talk to East Bay Mud, right? Or maybe do we do it? I want to let the staff kind of figure out what do we do. We want to get it to the board because I know that this is not currently part of our goals of what we set out a couple of years ago. So we would be changing the a little bit, slightly changing the direction of what we're currently doing. So we want to bring this to the board, but we want to set it up in a way that we know that we're not going to be taking the brunt of it. We got to work with East Bay Mud. We got to work with the City of Richmond because they're going to be a really big key to this because they have the water, right? From what I understand, 100% of their sewage water is going into the bay. And they're servicing about, what is it, 3/4 of Richmond. We service about 1/4, more give and take, maybe a little more, a little less, right? But they have a lot of water there. What can we do? And then we partner with Pinot, and Pinot is trying to have this conversation to move their water over to another sewage district in hopes to be able to bring in some purple pipe. So why have them do this purple pipe with the sewage district that's much farther than us? Why not maybe partner with them? I know they have their own sewage district for the rest of Pinot. We only service a little bit, right? But I think that there's conversations that if we bring in more of the stakeholders and seeing what everybody can do. But again, if maybe it's just us just bringing people to the table, but I don't want us to necessarily take everything on unless it's the wish of the staff and the board to say, hey, let's take this all on. But I think that the biggest stakeholder here is going to be East Bay Mud because they're already the purveyor. It's going to be a lot easier for them to bill. It's going to be a lot easier for them to go after money. They're a lot bigger agency. They're already doing this project in Alameda, so they can help mirror their project plan that they did before and bringing it in here. And now that we have the ears again of our assemblywoman and our 2 congressmen, both the outgoing and the incoming. So I think we have an opportunity right there, right off the bat. We have 2 votes in Congress that I think we can really leverage. And one of them happens to have really good leverage. We can also probably get our Senator Skinner, who happens to be the chair of the appropriations this time around. So, hey, money, right? More money can come into us. I think we are at a really great place where the stakeholders are coming together. We are realizing that the great need is going to be water, right? We've been in droughts for many, many years. What can we do to help that out? So we're coming in at a great opportunity where we can help solve for an issue that our state has had and will be having most likely for the foreseeable future. Very unfortunate, but that has to be the reality. But I think we can provide a really good solution and we can bring partners to this and continue being the leader on this, just like we've been the leaders on the do not flush wipes, right? There's been a lot of other agencies doing this, but we took the reins a little bit harder and we're taking that all the way out. Also the golf course here in Richmond, just here at Hilltop, they used to have a purple pipe a long time ago. So figuring out what happened to that infrastructure is probably crumbling because it hasn't been used, but it's been done before in our agency. And it will be great to see if we can do it again, by doing it at a much bigger scale. And maybe we, how do you eat an elephant? It's, 1 bite at a time. Maybe it's first working with the cities and providing this water to the cities for their irrigation citywide. And then we figure out the next step, how do we bring water into the homes or the businesses? And it could be different. Maybe it's figuring out, the first step is working with new businesses, right? As they're establishing new piping, we bring in the pipes to them. Right here at Hilltop, we're going to have this huge development or developments coming. Maybe it's working with them. Maybe they're the first group of big businesses and housing, the new hotel that's coming, etc. Maybe they take our recycled water first because they're going to break ground anyways. It's a great opportunity for this purple pipe. So anyways, I don't want to tell you all what to do, but I'm just saying there's an opportunity and maybe we need to bring a couple more people to the table and then figuring out how do we partner, and maybe it's creating a subgroup, But first, we need direction from the full board to say, yes, we want to move forward with giving some new direction to staff and also being able to give you the support, not asking you to do more, but making sure that we're also able to back it up. Michael, you flashed some numbers in there. I don't remember what they were, about 20 or 30,000, I think was in there.
Yeah, and that's just a staff guessing what we would need in order to go sit down and have some of these discussions with consultants to dig into some of these ideals and really figure out what RFPs do we need to send out, what do we need to investigate, and what do we need to look into. So it's just a swag number, so to speak, of what we would need in terms of initial support to start having these discussions.
Thank you. Yeah, so we can't give that direction from this committee, but we could from the full board. So if we bring this to the full board, and then I'm also hoping that if we bring East Bay Med to the table and the other agencies to the table, that they can also help with some of that funding, and then ultimately going after some of the state and national funding for these projects. I know when I talked to Congressman Garamendi, he had mentioned that there is a national push for more purple pipe. So again, I think we're at a place where we might be able to get some funding. And who goes after that? I'm thinking and hoping that it's East Bay Mud. But it's bringing all the different individuals to the table and see what we can do. But overall, I think it's a great presentation. But I would love to see if we can incorporate some of the other legwork, again, conversations that I've had, and see if we can get direction from the board. And then I'll partner anyone that wants to be in the email with our assembly member Wicks staff and seeing what we can do to start getting some of that funding should this continue to move forward. Someone's going to get the funding. The purple pipe will happen. It's just going to be a matter of whether we take the lead and we're part of the conversation, or whether East Bay Mud just comes in and does it. There's some conversations happening, and there's been happening a lot. So again, I just want to make sure that we don't miss coming on board and sitting at the table while other agencies are going to also do it. So I just want to make sure that we're partaking here and hopefully taking some leadership in this conversation. That's all I had here. But I would love to see if we can maybe make a couple edits to the presentation, if anything. Otherwise, we can just present it to the board and asking them. The final ask is to see if we can update our goals a little bit to further look into purple pipe and creating a committee. And hopefully Ms. King Meredith can help with that committee there too. The purple pipe committee, and bring in different stakeholders, and there might be very similar stakeholders that we have done with the wipes project, because those are the same stakeholders that I've been talking to. So that committee can just either grow or change, because we're almost done with the wipes project. But then bringing anybody else to that conversation. I'll pause there. So thank you, Michael. Great presentation. Thank you for your time and effort on this here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Director King Meredith, if there's no other questions, or Andrea, anything else from staff, I think we're good to move to the next.
No other questions. I'm good.
Okay. Now we can move to the next item then. And the next item is there is a degree of overlap. Yes, I'm sorry, Nicole.
No, I just wanted to, I couldn't see if there was anyone new and members of the public, if we'd reached out for public comment on this item before moving on.
We haven't received any. Let me double check. And there is no one new on our panel list. So that being said, we have no public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need approval to move it to the board meeting? No? Okay.
No, we got the committee, the recommendation we're hearing from the committee is that they would like to see it at the full board. And so
yes,
that's something we'll coordinate with the general manager on a schedule.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so the next item is related in many ways. And it's a little looser in that a discussion of the need for the updated operating agreements with the City of Richmond, Republic Services, the Republic of Richmond, I don't know, and other potential partners due to significant operational changes that will result from completion of the Clean and Green project improvements. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, Chair Zepeda is taking it to the board to say we might have to rearrange some goals or talk about things. We really are at a point right now where we have a tremendous amount of moving pieces and significant changes to our existing infrastructure, which is going to result in a great deal of effort that needs to go into these agreements. The first of which came to the board, and that was the amended and restated joint powers agreement for the West County Agency. We're also planning to go back to the West County Agency Board in December to further evaluate and bring before them the possibility of, does the West County Agency need to continue to exist, or is its purpose really in the past and now is merely an additional administrative burden? Can we do all of this with operating agreements instead of a separate governmental agency? And that opportunity is before us because as part of all the work in the Clean and Green project, we do have to change all these operating agreements. We are no longer going to be treating our sludge in open ponds, but rather we'll be drying it and sending it off as biosolids to hopefully a higher and better use. We aren't going to be able to operate the same way. So how we take the leachate from Republic, how we coordinate with East Bay Mud, how Richmond handles their sludge, and that we're expecting that it will come down the sludge leachate line, which hopefully at some point will only be a sludge line, and we don't have to have the operations back and forth. That's part of the discussion between Richmond and Republic Services. So, I mean, we could list all these different agreements and go through them, and at some point we will need to do that. But there's quite a number of them. One other thing that we are starting to take a look at is there is at the Republic landfill, there's a pilot project going on, partially funded from a number of investors, including Chevron, to create hydrogen fuel from the organic waste, the green compost that they have on top of the hill there. There's a possibility that our biosolids coming out of our new process at about 20% water weight could be shipped over to Republic and be part of a resource stream that is then turned into hydrogen fuel and biochar. It's at the very preliminary stages for us to decide if that makes sense for us or not. But if it does, our biosolids would no longer be shipped out to the Central Valley, but rather right next door to the Republic landfill, again, decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions. And what is the process for the hydrogen fuel generation? We'd have to investigate all that to make sure it's consistent with all of our other values and goals. But all of these are going on. And one that I don't even mention here is, as you mentioned earlier, Chair Zepeda taking a leadership role. That's what we're doing on the North Richmond shoreline for the Living Levee project and the collaboration. We met recently with Supervisor Joya and members of the county staff. And it's, to be blunt, I was pushing for, where is the leadership coming from the county? Because once we get past the 0.6 miles in front of our treatment plant, we can continue to be a leader and a collaborative partner all along that shoreline. But who from the county might be taking a greater leadership role? And basically there was silence. You know, it's not happening. It's not going to happen. We're going to continue to do that. And I mention this because that while we do want to be the leader and want to be leaders in so many of these things, there is a resource capacity limitation to what we can do with our current staffing. And so if we're really going to take on a much larger role and continue to take on the role that we're doing with the Living Levee project, we're going to have to take a look at that. How do we staff that? Because it isn't just a wave of a wand. It's a significant level of effort, even if it's just coordinating a purple pipe group to talk about this in a conceptual way. And essentially that's what Michael's numbers are. $20,000 to $30,000 isn't really enough money to determine if anything is feasible. It's really taking a look from a conceptual level, what are these questions and what are the answers, or what are the hurdles that we would have to remove or identify or work through. So it's really a conceptual level study to identify what Michael's already done in a cursory, and I don't mean to take anything away from Mike when I say cursory, but it is because there's so much behind each of those other elements he's identified. So I threw a lot out there. I know that, from the living levy to the leachate line and the WCA, JPA. But my point was at this meeting was just to say these are all the things that we have going on agreement wise and are needed and have to be completed, many of them within the next 2 years before the Clean and Green project comes completely online. And we'll be having to come back to the board with more details on all of these, as well as even finding who we're negotiating with the City of Richmond, because they've recently lost their public works director. But fortunately, we can't go back to the city manager and have those conversations again, but we have to make sure that Richmond is really ready to even engage with us in a meaningful way on these issues. And they need to, because their operation is going to change whether they want it to or not. So I can go into any of these in more detail. We can come back at future meetings and pull some of them out separately and talk a little bit more. But I just wanted to put that sort of universe of agreements and issues that we're working on and toward already as part of the ramifications of the Clean and Green project and us moving forward on the North Richmond shoreline planning efforts as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Ms. King-Meredith, Director King-Meredith, any questions or comments for Andrew?
Yeah, I just have a question. That was a great presentation, Andrew. I just have I'm just curious about the presentation that you brought forth to the Board of Supervisors, and you mentioned there was silent on the part of where we're going with part of this. Did they make any, after the silence, did anyone contact you afterwards there to let them know that they are considering to move forward with us on this, or do they have anything to put in at this point of discussion?
Okay. It was not the whole Board of Supervisors. It was Supervisor Joya and some county staff from the Flood Control District and their planning department. And it was at my request that we have the meeting because I just wanted to get a better sense from the county who we would be working with as we continue the planning along the North Richmond shoreline. For example, West County Wastewater, we have no planning authority. We have eminent domain authority, within our district for strictly the purposes of wastewater, but we don't have all the authorities that would be needed to ultimately create a special plan, an annex to the general plan, whatever it may be, for determining where would this levy alignment go. We can coordinate on a collaborative plan with the community and with other property owners conceptually and figure out what the details are on the hydrology, et cetera, of what's feasible. But ultimately, when this shoreline protection, say, gets built, it's not going to go out and wrap around all of these private properties and spending a lot of public dollars to protect private property. The alignment's going to happen somewhere, and those decisions are going to have to be made either by a regional government or by the local planning authority, which would be the Contra Costa County. And so what I was looking for was who from a staff level would be taking the lead sort of on coordinating some of that. And when I say there was silence, there was, the flood control district talked about the limits of their mandate, and the planning department is definitely interested, but they have their own work going on with sea level rise, a sustainability plan for the county as a whole. The members of the county staff at a staff level in those departments have been very cooperative and are working with us, and we're getting information from them and are willing to work with us. What isn't happening is from the county at a staff level, someone or some department saying, hey, we'll take leadership on this North Richmond shoreline. That vacuum exists. So we will continue to fill that. and continue to do that. And my point is that it does take a good deal of effort, primarily on my part and that of Joe Neugebauer and I, working with our other partners, and we'll continue to do so because it does make sense for us to do so. It is our ratepayers all the way to Parchester Village. So we can justify us being involved and taking that leadership role, but it does take time and a significant amount of effort. And at some point, the county is going to have to take a different position from a staff level and make some of those decisions. They can, realistically, those decisions aren't needed for another 2.5 years or so, as we can continue to develop an awful lot of this collaboration and fact finding and feasibility analysis. That can be done. It was one interesting comment from the director of planning. He asked a question if what I was doing was legal. And I laughed, Nicole. I said, well, yes, it is. But what he was driving at was right at that, where do we derive our planning authority for developing these kinds of plans? And the idea is that we're not developing a plan that is officially a plan of Contra Costa County for land use planning, but developing a collaborative plan that can be used as a framework for them to actually do that in the future. So I found it rather ironic that they weren't offering to take the lead, but did recognize that we were outside of our own, sort of jurisdiction and wanted to call us on that. And I'm like, well, then say you're going to take the lead on the 5-mile stretch and we'll support you. So we are getting cooperation. I want to stress that at a staff level, we're getting a lot of cooperation, but, cooperating and participating and leading are not the same thing. And so we will continue to do that. And it does take effort, and we're happy to do it because we see some real benefits, as well as making, being able to focus as a quote pilot project that area out in front of the treatment plant. And I think that by taking this role, we'll be able to create an attractive project and hopefully attract the funding, and then be able to construct something that will help protect our infrastructure, which in turn will help some of the others along the waterfront.
Andrew, if we can bring that up as a separate agenda item so we can concentrate on it more. And maybe if, what is the ask of the board, and then who else, right? 'Cause taking leadership should not be herding cats, right? Especially when we can't herd our neighbors' cats. Right? If they're getting mad saying, hey, do you even have jurisdiction when you come over to this side? Right? It's my cat. Don't hurt my cat. But hurt my cat because I'm not doing it. Right? So we have to, what is the question? Who do we bring in? Do we ask Joya, hey, you got to agendize this and then give direction to your staff and then bring a herder with us?
I'm not sure there's anything additional that we need from the board at this point regarding that. I sort of pushed the question and pushed the issue because I wanted to see what would happen at the county staff level. How would they respond? If I were in the planning department at Contra Costa County, I would have pushed for wanting to be able to take the lead on that. I think that they should, but there's not really that inclination. As long as we're getting the cooperation from the staff, especially the flood control district, for the work that we need to do on the levees. I mean, they would say things like, well, if we do that, we're going to have to open up the Army Corps of Engineers permit. I'm like, well, no kidding. That's what we're here to talk about, is like, not say, what are the hurdles, what are the roadblocks, what will make it difficult, but we've identified many of those. How do we address them? And so just trying to get that, thought process in there. So we put it out, and the supervisor was helpful. And I think that we will get a significantly improved level of cooperation from the planning department. And we will be following up with the director of planning on that. So I think at this point, we don't really need any further, sort of push at staff from the outside. It was a way of kind of alerting them to the fact that while we may take the lead and can do this for a while, there will come a time where that no longer can happen. if there's going to be decisions that are being made along the North Richmond shoreline, they're going to have to come from another agency. They can't be coming from us. And so I think we were successful in that meeting, and it did really illuminate what we had kind of thought is at this point, there's no real appetite from county staff to take the lead on it. And that's okay. I think that we derive some significant benefits by continuing to take the lead. And if they want to complain that we're doing so, they had their opportunity to sort of push in and weigh in. They talked about a couple of things like, well, maybe we create a JPA. I laughed because I can't even get people to sign on to we aren't even calling it a memorandum of agreement. We're calling it a charter that we just want people to sign to commit that they'll come to meetings on a regular basis. So to create a JPA. So it's there's so many questions that need to be answered about regulatory and jurisdictional issues, but we have control. We have property control along our own waterfront. And so that's why we're also focused and narrowing it in. And that's the advantage to be in the role that we are. We have an opportunity to sort of steer it in a direction that makes the most sense for us, but also in the long term makes the most sense, I believe, for the whole North Richmond shoreline. If we can demonstrate a viable project in front of our own treatment plant, it can be used as a springboard for the rest of the 5 miles.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, let us know what we can do to help out. Sounds like you got it. You're continuing with that leadership. Thank you.
Well, we'll definitely need to come back with some specific questions in the future as we push forward on some of these decisions, also around land. And so we could have a separate item, like you said, Chair Cepeda, just to talk about this, because as we get out of the sludge farming business, property becomes available. And how we utilize that property, we have a number of ideas. I do, and we've been talking with some others. Some of it will be wetland habitat restoration, which makes sense as part of managed retreat. We may be able to land bank essentially some of those mitigation credits to help some of our neighbors who don't have that ability to be able to do so because they don't have enough property. And that might be helpful. We also create a potentially high value property where those sludge ponds are right against Richmond Parkway, which eventually will be protected by a levee system sitting up on a little bit higher ground and could have a fairly high commercial value depending what we wanted to utilize them for. And how do we want to do that? What is our goals? You know, is it a solar array? Is it battery storage? Is it coordination with the hydrogen fuel project? There's a number of items that would be consistent with our mission and our vision, rather than just another warehouse for FedEx or something like that.
Right. Okay.
They have enough warehouses.
Very good. Yeah.
Can we bring that up in one of the next agendas too? That would be great.
That's great.
We can discuss that. It's premature from the standpoint of really knowing what we would do with it. But what I would like to be able to point out, because ultimately those would be decisions the board would have to make on how we use that property. That I definitely have some things I could present on how we want to utilize some of the property right up against the waterfront, because we'll need to do that as for wetland habitat restoration as part of the levee project. But some of these others, you know, things that we would want to consider, you know, the kind of what should we take into consideration when looking at how to utilize the property and what, you know, consistent with our mission.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else on this agenda item, Andrew?
No, I have nothing more. I think, and I guess part of me, and I'll be perfectly honest, Chair Cepeda, was to put this here just to say, I appreciate the reclaimed water vision, but we got a lot on our plate right now.
And thank you, and Andrew, and thank you for bringing that up. I definitely know, right? I just had to bring it up, and I don't want to add more to your already overflowing plates. And there's not plate, but it's plates. I know all of you are handling multiple plates at a time, so I greatly appreciate that. It's just an idea. And I think that we are at a place, just again, from having all the different conversations, we're at a place where the purple pipe is going to happen. And it's just a matter of whether we're part of it or not. There's a lot of other stuff that I can't bring up in this meeting, but that's why I can tell you that I can see the purple pipe coming.
Yeah. Well, one last question. Is it purple pipe or is it a step further down the road in direct potable water reuse? And we don't have to deliver. We don't have to build an entirely new distribution network, but you rather deliver the water to a treatment facility that then can essentially inject it into an existing delivery system.
And it could be that.
Yeah.
East Bay Mud is looking at, they have projects in the pipeline, no pun intended, that they are looking at different options.
Mm-hmm.
And I think different communities are pushing them to do more and do something different. So there's going to be more ideas that might not yet be public, right? They're still trying to figure out what's going on. But again, I think that if we're part of the conversation, then we can help, maybe we can say, look, we're here, here's what we do. We're not going to change what we do, but we're here. If you want to use our, pipe 247, you can use it. But you do everything else.
Not our wastewater system is the distribution, but the existing potable water distribution.
Yeah. So I
we
don't
have a hard
answer.
time. Michael pointed out, using our system, it flows for the most part under gravity. If we put our system under pressure to push it back up the hill, most of it would shatter.
Yeah, so it might be that, again, maybe we just provide some of the water or some of the access between the other agencies like Pinole and Richmond, and then East Bay Mud takes it. And then they then push it back out because they're already giving us clean water. Or maybe it's not a purple pipe. Maybe it is, potable versus unpotable. But that's part of the conversation we should have.
It ultimately might be like some of the distributed power generation on the grid, that there might be a series of smaller treatment plants further up in the watersheds that take advantage of the gravity and be able to treat water and then distribute it back into the potable water system rather than letting it get to the bottom of the hill. There's a lot of major infrastructural changes like that could happen in the decades ahead.
Well, it will be great if we can at least start this conversation. That I didn't realize that, Andrew. So that's great, right? Your great minds, I think, can help add to this conversation that I hear about others having as well. And I think we can just hopefully bring everyone to the table.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else with this agenda item, do we have any? I think that's the last one.
We have no further. Well, the next is the reports matter pertaining to work of the committee.
For the record, were there any public comments on the previous item?
There were no public comments and there is no one in our attendees.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Keep us up.
No reports for me. I don't know, Director King Meredith, any reports from you on this committee?
None at this time.
And I think we go to the next item.
And no further updates from agency manager or staff.
And then the next item.
Adjournment. Are you ready? I'm ready this time.
You're ready, Kate? Perfect.
So we can adjourn the meeting this morning at 10:57, and our next infrastructure operations and environmental committee meeting is slated for November 8th.
Perfect. November 8th is election day.
Okay.
So just FYI. Thank you all. Have a beautiful rest of your morning. Thank you for all the great work you're doing and you're continuing to do. We greatly appreciate it on behalf of our community. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you all again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night.